Today's topic is
China, expectations versus reality.
So Simil, where are we going today?
Today I figured we'd grab a bite to eat to highlight some of the expectations that you have when you come to China. So Winston, before you came to China, what did you expect China to be like?
I'm going to be totally honest and say I never really formed a very strong opinion about China, because before I came to China I wasn't all that interested in China.
Okay.
I was very interested in Asia, Japan specifically, before I came here, and I had an idea what China was, but not a very concrete one.
Sure.
Let's go up here.
Okay.
Okay, back to answering your question. Before I came to China, I had an idea that China would be very backward and very rural, you know, still very developing and quite poor, etc. And, well, to be honest, in the rural areas it's like that, but I was actually blown away when I arrived in Shenzhen and saw brand new beautiful skyscrapers and neon lights everywhere and modern things and modern fashions, and you know, it was really just quite opposite to what I was expecting. How about you?
Exactly the same thing that you went through. The first place I was in Shenzhen, and when I arrived, I was like, dude, this is not what I had thought it was gonna look like. I actually thought that China was gonna have a lot of that kind of like bamboo flute dude playing like a traditional instrument on the side of the road, Chinese chess, kung fu monks. I really did think it might look kind of like the movies that you watch in those old kung fu movies, you know. So for me, I was like, whoa, this is not what I had thought.
Yeah, that's a point that I actually forgot to mention, is I was also expecting temples and dragons and, you know, those dragon dances and stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, especially in Shenzhen, there is no such thing really. So I was pretty much let down, and later on finding the temples, etc., you find it's completely different to what's portrayed in the Hollywood movies.
Sure.
Alright, C-Milk, next question. What were your expectations of Chinese people before you came to China?
I worked in retail before I came to China. Obviously, I was in high school and university just trying to pay the bills. And I remember a lot of the Chinese customers that would come in, they usually didn't speak English, which was kind of annoying because you're in America. Number two, they're always quite rude, like at the Chinese restaurants and everything. Customer service is usually pretty poor, and they just weren't 90% of the time not very pleasant people to be around. And also my classmates that would come from China and study abroad in America, they would kind of group together and they wouldn't branch out, so they'd never come to the parties. They wouldn't really want to speak English and hang out with the local people. So for me, I actually expected them to be really, really closed off and kind of distant, and was pleasantly surprised when I got here and found out that Chinese people in their own country are incredibly welcoming, helpful, and super, super nice. What about you?
Yeah, actually, before I came to China, I honestly thought that China would be a very constricting place, because all you see in the news overseas is, you know, how bad it is here. You know, the people kind of live in fear and they're controlled by their government, and their sort of secret police walking around trying to nab people for saying bad things against the government. That's kind of the idea you get, right?
Sure.
And you always see footage of soldiers marching around in Beijing near Tiananmen Square and stuff. So I was expecting people to be very controlling and very unfriendly and very suspicious of foreigners especially. And I was pleasantly surprised, like you, to find out that people are actually incredibly friendly and very welcoming and very hospitable and very open. So it really blew my mind. Chinese people are nothing like I expected them to be.
Sure. So Winston, what do you think Chinese people's expectations of foreigners are?
Okay, yes. Well, first of all, when it comes to being English, there are some interesting expectations. And I have to explain, by the way, your indicator's on. I have to explain that although I am South African, I'm British South African, and so coming to China, I, in the beginning, used to always tell people I was from South Africa. They'd ask me, where are you from? And I'd say, I'm South African in Chinese.
Yeah.
Which is a mistake, because immediately the first question they would ask, well, they would actually, it's a statement, they would say, but you're not black. Which is, first of all, a little bit strange.
Right.
Because no, obviously they're just naive and don't understand what South Africa is like. But they have an expectation that anyone from Africa is going to be black.
Sure.
Which is, you know, a little bit odd. Anyway, so I stopped saying I'm from South Africa because I got tired of trying to explain to everybody that there are British people, white people, Indian people, many different kinds of people in South Africa. So I just say I'm from England because in all actuality my parents are British and, you know, I've got British ancestry, so there's no lie there. So I just said I'm British. And the expectations I found that Chinese have for British people is they expect British people to all be sort of gentlemen with like a top hat and an umbrella, and, you know.
Sure.
That's, every time I say I'm from England, I will always get, they'll say, oh, gentlemen, you know, which is a fairly nice expectation. Unfortunately, it's not really true. Very few gentlemen British people make it to China.
That's true.
Okay, how about you?
I'm American, and
what are we doing here?
I guess we probably got to ride up this thing. There's two ways we can do this. We can go on the left of it, or we could go up the stairs.
I prefer to go on this. The stair thing's a bit precarious, but this is a bit dodgy, so yeah. Okay, I'll go first, huh?
All right.
Keeping it first the whole way.
Yeah. Nice. Nice.
Okay.
We made it. All right.
So, Seamilk, what do you think the Chinese perception of Americans is?
Well, I used to toy around with the idea of telling people I was German because of the expectations of Americans. I was getting kind of like upset in the beginning. A lot of them assume that Americans are like these, what they see on TV, like these overly sexualized kind of like pervy fat guys, basically, you know, either like an action hero that's like banging girls all the time, or like some fat dude eating at McDonald's, basically. And you know, both of those things are kind of incorrect. What, are we going here?
Yes, down there.
Okay. So since my family's from Germany, I used to just kind of toy with it and be like, oh yeah, I'm from Germany, and they'd be like, oh my god, you're so awesome, like Germans are so badass, Hitler is so powerful, and like just absolutely ridiculous expectations, like, oh, you're so calculated, you're so economical, you're so pragmatic, you know, like they have all these expectations of Germans. But for Americans, like I said, for the most part, it's like either you're like the dudes in the movies and TV shows, or you are like some fat douchebag who eats McDonald's all day.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. If people say they're American, they often say, oh, you're so open.
Yeah, open. Oh god, what does that even mean?
Yeah, it's a bit dodgy. But then again, if you watch American TV, not being American myself, you assume that everyone's just a spoiled, horny child.
But as a Westerner, you know that entertainment is entertainment, you know?
Absolutely,
so it's like...
I understand that fully. But to be honest, before I met you, and you know, I haven't met all that many Americans in my life, living in South Africa, obviously. There are not many there. In fact, very few. But in China, I met a lot of bad Americans in the beginning. And I had a very bad impression of Americans in general until I met you and a couple of other really decent, upstanding American folk, you know. So yeah, I can understand why Americans get a bad rap in China anyway. Hey Seamilk, how about we try that Lao Shanqi restaurant?
Sure.
Okay, so, well, let's get out the vlogging camera and do a little bit of a walk and talk. So, Seamilk, let's get something that maybe most people wouldn't expect to find in China.
So Winston, what do you got there?
Well, this is a rou jiamo, one of my favorite Chinese foods. And you can take a look. It basically looks like a, what would you say? Like a kebab almost, or a hamburger or something along those lines. It's like a pita bread and it's jam full of really delicious meat. You wouldn't expect to find something like this in China because it's not typical of what Westerners think Chinese food is. So this is just another one of those things that, you know, you have a perception of something, but in reality it's really different. Cool. Hey Seamilk, what's the common question for today?
Alfred Dorkelem asks, topic, electric cars and charging stations in China. There is a big e-bike culture there, but how about electric cars?
Actually, Shenzhen, the city that I live in, is the first city to introduce electric taxis. And there are charging stations scattered around Shenzhen. They are a little hard to find, but they are there. And in fact, they've got incentives. For instance, you don't need to pay for parking if you have an electric car, etc. As well as getting a whole lot of tax reductions on purchasing a car and rebates, etc. So they're trying to push for electric cars. They were gaining steam, but there were a couple of incidents where the electric taxis were involved in big accidents and actually caught fire, and that kind of shattered consumer confidence. But we'll see. I see a lot of Teslas on the streets.
You're absolutely correct when you say e-bikes are super popular in China. In this city of Huizhou, where we have our motorcycle shop, e-bikes are the primary form of transportation due to the fact that motorcycles were kind of made in a gray area and traffic is so bad. So absolutely, China is the leader in terms of per capita use of e-bikes.
Right, Seamilk, should we hit the road?
Let's hit the road.
Thanks for watching, guys. That was expectations of how we thought China was going to be before we got here and how Chinese people are.
Right guys, so I'd just like to add that you should never presume that a place or a person is going to be a certain way. You should always see it for yourself. The way I thought China was before I got here was completely wrong. And it took living here for 10 years now to see what China really is all about. So first go and experience something before you knock it, basically.
If you ever have any topic suggestions or you want to leave a comment, please do so below, and we'll see you next time.
So that's it for this episode, guys, and as always, stay awesome.